Coming up this week on the Digital Lifestyle Show 800, Allan Peed, MVP from South Africa, is going to be joining us. But we're not talking development, we're talking retro computers. He's got a fascinating, interesting retro computers, particularly around spectrums. He's got a lot of spectrums and a lot of retro computers. We're going to talk about that, restoring computers, best way of storing them and getting them up and running, how you can use them with modern equipment, and he's also going to be building from scratch as well. So we've got a really good show with Richard and Alan. So we'll go straight to Alan. Good evening, Allan Peed. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. It's awesome to be joining from this side of the world.
Well, you say this side, Will. So just explain to us where you are then.
I'm in Cape Town, South Africa, so at the bottom of Africa. So
I think I'm right, Richard. That's probably the first guest we've had from South Africa, probably even from Africa.
I think so.
Oh, well, I'm privileged to be attending then.
Well, many thanks for joining us. We were just wrapping. Richard's been ranting about the Apple keynote, which he was following along with, and not overly enamoured with some of the product launch, I think, or confused perhaps by some of their offerings.
Yes, that's fair.
Yeah, on the topic of retro things, they re-envisioning their old iMacs in different colors.
Yeah, there's a big old
That was one of the highlights.
I must admit, I didn't think we'd step back in time, but crikey, we're going back to the big chins again. Okay, fine. I just wish for simpler times.
Well, talking of simpler times, thanks for joining us, Alan. The reason why I wanted to get you on the show is because I've been following you on Twitter for some time. You're a Windows developer, aren't you, and an MVP as well?
I wouldn't say Windows developer, but I'm an MVP.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. But so I've been following you for some time, and then I've seen all your retro posts that you've been, and that got my interest peaked, and we've been talking retro stuff on this show for a long time. Richard's a bit of a TI-99 fan.
Right, so.
And I'm a Sinclair. I'm a Sinclair guy.
Yeah, I'm a Sinclair guy as well.
Oh, great, good. We can gang up on Richard on this.
Yeah, we can bond.
I would say that the joy of being a fan of old machines these days is we can all join together in a common cause, whereas 40 years ago we might have argued in the playground.
No, 100%. Yeah, I now collect all kinds of models. I'm not just biased to Sinclair. If it's old, I collect it.
Well, that's fantastic. So what I think, so like I said, I've seen all your retro stuff that you've been talking about, and we're big fans of retro stuff. And then what I particularly saw was that you were kind of set yourself a project to build some stuff from scratch. So we'll come back to that. So first, just give us a background on who you are and how you and what you're into.
Yeah, so I'm not a Windows developer, a .NET developer. So
okay, get that right. Yep.
Microsoft stack. The majority of the work I do is either IoT or Xamarin development. So mobile development, and Windows does feature in that for cross-platform development and things like that. I now run my own dev company. I started that in 2012. I decided that yes, these dev companies I always work for, I can do that too. So I've been doing that since 2012, which also frees me up to do some cool projects and cool, interesting things in between. My past, I had and on the retro theme, I started off with a ZX Spectrum. Back when I was about 5, my father brought one home, and I started learning Sinclair Basic on that, and moved from that to Turbo Pascal, and I wrote my first commercial software way back in 1994 in Turbo Pascal for DOS, and then migrated to Turbo Pascal for Windows. Moved from there to Delphi eventually, and did Delphi for way too long time. And in between did some C++, and did Java as well. And eventually when it was .NET 2 came out, .NET was a viable platform to use. So I've been a C# developer since then. I used a platform called Mono, which is .NET for everything that wasn't Windows at the time, before I actually used .NET. And that's how I led to Xamarin. And I became a Microsoft MVP via Xamarin, because I first became a Xamarin MVP before Microsoft purchased Xamarin. And then, so I'm a Xamarin MVP and then a Microsoft Developer Technologies MVP. And recently, because I do lots of IoT work, I'm also an Azure MVP as well.
Okay, so pretty much in the Microsoft ecosystem, but what?
Yes.
Yeah, which not unlike Gary is one of our hosts. I don't know if you know Gary Whitaker. Very similar to Xamarin and that kind of development. So I think he'd be enjoying listening to the show this week because he's not able to join us tonight. So, like I said, the retro stuff. What have you always been into these stuff, or did you get you throw away your computers as you progress, and then have you come back to them?
Yeah, so as I said, I got a Spectrum when I was 5. My father was very much into electronics and things back then as well. He built a ZX80 from a kit when it was first released, and he got a ZX81. And I only started really getting interested, or old enough to be interested in those things, when the ZX Spectrum came out. So he had one of those as well. So that's how I started. And I started with the basic and typing in programs from books and magazines. And in those days, there wasn't the internet. So I used to go to the library to get a code book to go type in, and was very upset when the Spectrum crashed and you typed the wrong thing and you started again and things. So yes, so that's how I started. And then I also went into studies on electrical engineering and things like that, because my father used to do those type of things and build for retro machines and things like that. But then my first jobs were in electrical engineering, but then I decided that, yes, it didn't pay so well back then. So I went into normal mundane business programming and stuff like that, and just moved through from those retro computer days to normal IBM PCs, and then the boring XT to 286 to 386 to 486 and stuff like that. So moved through all those ranks and stuff. The retro computers, I kind of lost track of that over the years. So I still have the original Spectrum that I had, but did lose track of this retro computers over time. And only in I think it was about 3 years ago, I got back into it, because I saw in one of these in South Africa, we've got a site called Bid or Buy, which is very much like eBay, and I saw a ZX Spectrum there, and I decided, now I'm going to go buy the ZX Spectrum. So I drove all the way. The Spectrum was in a coastal city called Amanus. I drove like 2 hours to go and get this ZX Spectrum. But when I got to the person's house, and on the topic of Apple today, and the iMacs and stuff, the person also had 20 G3 iMacs as well. So he was emigrating to Canada, so he was going to throw them in a dump. So I decided, well, I'm going to take my ZX Spectrum that I paid for, but I also want these 20 iMacs as well. So you can imagine how difficult it was to drive 2 hours up and down with G3 iMacs, 20 of them, which was a huge undertaking. And then I piled them into the house. So I took up a whole room in the house of these G3 iMacs, and now I was sitting with a problem. Like, now what do I do with them? And then I found in South Africa, I actually never knew about them. There's a actual vintage community group. It's called the Vintage Computer Group of South Africa. And I found them by just virtue of now trying to get rid of these iMacs without throwing them out, because that would be very sad to see those machines go in the dump. And then I found out this whole new world of people collecting retro things. So that's how I got back into it. And what they do is they restore old machines, they fix them up, and basically all dead machines that they find, they restore. So I became part of that group. And since then, and that was about 3 years ago, I've now collected every Sinclair machine that was available, either via them or finding them somewhere, because I've also found that once you start collecting these things, other machine seems to find you. So you
that's why I've got a few up there.
Yes.
And over there.
Yeah, I'm looking at that shelf behind you. Yes.
Yeah.
So machine seems to find you. So I've collected the whole Sinclair range except for the MK14. So I've got the range from the ZX80, ZX81, the ZX Spectrum 16K, the 48K, the Spectrum Plus, then that's the toast rack with the Spectrum Plus 128, and then the Plus 2 Grey, the Plus 2A, the Plus 2B, and the Spectrum Plus 3 as well, and the QL, and then I kind of overstepped that bounds and then went into some of the Amstrads as well. So I've got a CPC it's 464 as well, and I've got Sinclair's other machines as well, like the Cambridge Z88 as well, which was like a little more like a
Portable
laptop
one.
type portable machine. Quite amazing. It runs on like 4 AA batteries, and it lasts longer than one of my laptops. The 4 AA batteries. And then I also started seeing that I started collecting these Sinclair things because the Sinclair machines always had an interest of mine, because it was a childhood memory of having the Spectrum and playing on the Spectrum every day and things like that. I started collecting these other devices as well. So I've got a Sinclair multimeter. I've got the original Sinclair Radiotronics radio. It's like a little portable radio. And then his whole TV range. So
you've got those,
the first flat screen Sinclair TV. I've got the long, I think it's called Microvision TV as well.
The tube one, yeah.
Yes, a very small screen but very long. So I collected that as well. And yes, so the multimeter also found me. And then I discovered there's a whole range of Sinclair machines I didn't know about as well. So the QL had an offshoot by a company called ICL, called One Per Desk. So they built. Oh
yes, I remember.
Yeah. So they built the QL into a One Per Desk, which the whole definition of One Per Desk is that it's all integrated into one machine. So it comes with a monitor attached, it's got a keyboard, and it's got a phone attached to it as well. So it's got a modem connector and a phone connector, and you can actually dial straight from the One Per Desk, and it's got all the comm software and stuff built into it. So I never knew that existed, but I got one, and then 2 arrived because I had one. So I've got now 3 of those. So retro computers also becomes like an addiction afterwards, because the more you get, the more you collect.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I've got an 81 over there and a Spectrum, and there's a plus 2 and a QL up there. We'll come back to QL.
2 and a QL. Awesome.
So in South Africa, then, was the Spectrum a big computer in the time? Was it as busy as the UK?
Yeah, it was, because everything that we got in South Africa was from the UK. So our technology came from the UK. It didn't come from the US. So we got all the things that the UK had. So the Sinclair was also part of that whole range. Mm-hmm. And all the kits we got. So as I said, my father had that ZX80 kits and things. So all the shops stocked all the Sinclair products. What wasn't big in South Africa was things like Commodores and C64. I never saw when I was young. I had envy when I saw an Amiga 500 once. So I got a glimpse of an Amiga, but they weren't big in South Africa. However, now I've discovered they were bigger than I thought, because in this retro computer group, they pop up every couple of weeks, like a new one gets found somewhere. So they are more popular than what I thought, but the Sinclair range was by far the dominant machine back in those days.
Well, I thought I had a lot of Sinclair machines, I thought certainly I had probably too many, but it sounds like I've not got half as many as you've got.
Well, I haven't got half as many as some of the others in the group has got as well. So there's always people that has more.
I suppose you've got to get the accessories like the micro drives and the interface 1s, interface 2s, and all those.
interface 1s, interface 2s, all the joystick interfaces. I've got things like the Curious Speech module as well for like text to speech. So yes, you end up collecting all those type of things. And I've got piles and piles of micro drives, which I have no idea what I'm going to do, and piles of manuals and coding books and Spectrum books, and I've got all the original QL manuals as well. So I've got I've got everything as it came mint from Sinclair's factory. all the manuals, the boxes, everything.
Have you got I used to have a music interface which was really good. I'm really sad that I got rid of it. It was a RAM music machine. There was a car. Yes. It fitted on the back there, and you could do 8-bit sampling on it, and it was brilliant.
Yes, yeah, it's one of those things that's brilliant until you heard better.
Yeah.
It's like that Curious Speech as well. It's like I was playing with it the other day. It's like, this is not like Google Home or Siri.
No. Yeah, I think I do remember those. That there was, and the other one that you could use was the Spectrum, which in 1986 sounded fantastic, but when you put it against like drum machines of that era, it's not quite the same thing. But they've got kind of the retro charm on it. But I guess it's like when you start getting into collecting these vintage kit and you're in the community, and you see them come up for sale, it's just hard to resist.
Yes. Yeah, I mentioned that's Amiga 500. I got one of those as well, a boxed edition as well. So that's my first Commodore that I got. I also got the Acorn Electron. So I watched. I don't know if you've watched the I think it's a British series, Micromen.
We've talked about that many times.
Yeah. So it takes you through the history of Acorn and Sinclair, and after that, I saw the Electron, and I decided, well, that looked like something that was quite cool back then, so I got one of those as well. So I got a boxed one. That one was also a restore project as well. It was boxed, but the keyboard didn't work. So it was one of those exercises to find all the keyboard switches and stuff. What's nice is you can get all the original cherry switches and stuff for that. So that was quite an interesting soldering exercise of soldering off every key switch from the board.
Wow.
And fixing it up. So now it's actually quite a nice machine.
And that's what one of the things we're going to talk about is the restoration of it, because I suppose a lot of this kit now is like what you said, it's 40 years old, and although many of them work, most of mine work without that much remedial work, when you're buying these things, you've got to be prepared, I suppose, to do a bit of restoration on them.
Yes, yeah. So a ZX Spectrum, when you get it, you can almost guarantee that the keyboard membrane doesn't work, because that membrane was not great quality back in the day, but like 40 years later, it starts crumbling and things like that. So that's the first thing that you generally have to do with the ZX Spectrum, is replace the keyboard membrane. And what's nice is you get brand new components for these machines. So there's a whole community of people that's dedicated to remaking the components that you need. So like there's companies in the UK like ZX Renew. So Peter Smith, I don't know if you followed him or something on Twitter or know him.
I've seen it through your links. That's how I was made aware of it. Yeah.
So from him, I've imported probably about 50 different membranes for Spectrums and restored them from a keyboard perspective. What they also sell is the full cases for the Spectrum. So if your case is broken, you can get a new case. The faceplates, because when you open a Spectrum, the faceplate generally gets bent and things like that and scratched. You can buy all those. The keyboard rubbers you can get. For the Spectrum Plus 2s and Plus 3s that have drive belts for their disk drives and their tape players, you can get all those type of things. I ordered the other day for my CPC new tape mechanisms for it as well. So you can even replace the tape drives with these machines with new components as well, which is quite incredible.
Mm-hmm.
So you can restore them quite nicely. And all the chips you can still get. You can still get Z80s. You can still get the RAM chips. The what's it, 6116s and 4116s and stuff like that. You can get all those chips quite easily.
And what the one, I think, Richard, did we talk about this last week? I think was it the ULAs? Is that the one that's the hard, that's like the custom one that is hard to get hold of?
Yes, but what you can find is all the suppliers, like people like Retrolium and stuff, they actually have still a stockpile of the original ULAs. Right. So you can still get those. You can also get some of the components. I've also fixed up also Commodores as well. Commodore 64s are fixed up. You can also get those proprietary chips as well. So there is still a stockpile of the old chips that they probably couldn't shift back then. They're shifting them now still, and it's amazing that all those components work fine.
Yeah, but is there something like power supplies and things like that? Is the thing that you've always got to check with those? Because that seems to be like they've got the capacitors and the ones that they're going to be at risk.
Yeah, so the power supplies, you can use modern power supplies with it. You just have to be careful with some of the switch mode power supplies, seeing that they got like a noisy power output. The original retro computers weren't designed for that. So if you get a low-tech power supply or modern one, those work fine. As long as, of course, you get your voltages and polarities right, it will work. But if you get some of these cheap off-the-shelf switch mode power supplies, it will cause, and you generally see it from patterns on the screen and things like that, because they weren't really designed for it. But you can get modern replacement power supplies. Fixing some of the old power supplies is sometimes a problem, because they sometimes, or they used to take it and fill them with resin, and to chisel it out in the resin is impossible. So in those cases, don't replace it, or don't repair it. Try and replace it with a modern equivalent.
Yeah, I mean, it's not so bad on the Spectrum, the original Spectrums, because they've got the standard power socket that you get on modern stuff. I think the QL and the plus 2s and 3s have got the DIN plugs, haven't they? So they're a bit more specialist.
Yeah, the DIN plugs you can buy, so those are readily available. You just have to wire them up yourself.
Yeah. And
for that Amiga, that's the Amiga 500 that I got. It didn't have a power supply, but I just took a Cisco router power supply, which had the right voltages and things like that for the pins, and then bought the actual compatible plug, which you can still get for Amiga, which is the same as a C64. So I wired that up myself, but it's just like a Cisco router power supply.
I was surprised actually because one of the things I'm trying to do is get the QL back up and running. And I was surprised how big the power supply for the plus 2 and the QL are. They're big, meaty, chunky things, aren't they?
Yeah, the QL though is a difficult machine to get to work, because you need microdrives. Like a Spectrum is a nice thing that you can play audio into it and it works.
Yeah.
With the QL.
I've got my QL soft library. I don't know if you can see that. Yeah, QL chess as well. Yeah, Match Point.
Very cool. Yeah,
£11.95 from Selfridges. Good value, I'm sure.
Awesome. Yeah, because the problem with the QL is they never decided to put on audio sockets, so you can't play stuff into it. So everything has to be played with microdrives. So what I did for mine is you can buy something called a V drive. So it's in a box that's been 3D printed that looks like a QL power supply, but it takes an SD card. So it looks like a original peripheral for the QL, but you can then wire in, and it's got a little cable that goes into the QL, and you can then load off SD cards. So that's good. Yeah, so it kind of replaces the microdrives in the machine. So it's kind of an SD card to microdrive like converter type thing, but then at least you can load things, because that's the biggest frustration with the QL is like finding something to load.
Yeah, Yeah, that's it. Because I was showing off my QL last week, and I decided to try if I can get that up and running. But I got as far as powering it up last week. But the next issue is connecting it up to a modern monitor, which I think is another thing I was going to ask you about.
Yes. Yeah. So you can wire it up via. I've got it actually in one of these arcade machine boards. That's, I think it's a GBS 8800, which takes in RGB input, and then you can push out to VGA and things like that.
Right. Because I got one of these the other week. This is a SCART to VGA to HDMI, and I haven't tried it with the QL yet, but I tried it with Spectrum last week and it didn't work. Yeah,
you find lots of those don't work. I've got also piles and piles of converters and dongles and things like that. Majority of those don't work with old machines. It'll work with like a modern day TV or device that outputs SCART. It'll go to HDMI, but those old machines also weren't quite standard. So they kind of missed the specs of things. So the modern equipment doesn't accept it.
Yeah, so when I plugged the +2 into that, I could just about make some faint black and white writing out on the screen, but no color. So what would you recommend then for me to do if I want to get the QL? Because I've got a QL cable here with the SCART plug on it. So what would I need to buy to make that work?
Yeah, so you can actually buy the cables. There's a Retro Shack. I can give you the link to it. That sells cables that'll take in the output of the QL and then push it out to a TV. It's got the electronics in it as well. Or you can go the route that I went with mine. It's called a GBS 8800. They use it in arcade machines that you can take RGB input. And it takes the RGB input and then outputs like VGA and things. And then that you can then convert to HDMI with the modern adapters and things like that. So it's a GBS 8800. That works nicely. I also wire up all of the other things to it as well.
Yeah, so that's what because I've got a QL SCART cable and Spectrum SCART cable, but it's the next bit. So I'll take a look at that because I think I want to see if I can get my QL up and running and play Match Point, sign Match Point.
that match Point is awesome. I used to play that endlessly. 2-player tennis. that was actually a brilliant game. Yeah.
Because Rich and I were talking about this last week. The QL was kind of a fascinating machine because at the age we were, it was kind of the machine where it was like, wow, this new thing that's coming from Sinclair, and it was expensive and not really aimed at at home users. So it always seemed this on the table thing. It's right, Richard. We were kind of reminiscing about this. We wanted to get into the QL.
It was indeed. It was the machine we wanted, and it had 2 microdrives, sometimes both of which worked at the same time.
Yeah. But now my bugbear is it only has 2 microdrives. I took in audio from the outside wall. Because like a Spectrum's easy because you can now play in audio from a cell phone with a TAT file or a TZX file or something like that, or you can play it with an MP3 player or anything. As long as it provides audio, you can load a program.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in Sinclair's genius, he came a bit short with that QL.
But it was such a great looking machine, though. It is a great looking machine still. I think it's almost like the final pure Sinclair machine, where it's it's got the right keyboard. It's great, and it's also very old.
Yeah, the keyboard is very good. It's better. It's better than the Spectrum Plus keyboard.
Okay.
Yeah.
I certainly prefer the aesthetics of it to the +2 and the Amstrad Sinclair devices.
Yeah. And that's you've seen the ZX Spectrum Next.
Yeah, I've seen pictures of it, and I haven't actually used one in anger. So just explain to what that is.
Yeah, so that's a modern recreation of a Spectrum. So what's really cool about the ZX Spectrum Next is it was actually designed by the original Spectrum designer. So Rick Dickinson was the original ZX Spectrum and Plus designer, and he was roped in to help design the recreated version. So what they did was they took the aesthetics of the ZX Spectrum Plus and just made it more polished. And that keyboard is brilliant. And they also took it as a version of the Spectrum, like what would have come out next, hence the name. So it's a higher spec Spectrum. It runs all the Spectrum software and things like that, but it also runs more things. And what they did was they recreated the processor as well with its FPGA. And it can run different cores, so you can run different things as well. So I also run CPC on it as well. But yeah, check. I see you looking at the design of it. That looks awesome, and the keyboard is brilliant.
Yeah, it's just kind of got the look of the Spectrum Plus and the QL in a more sort of modern form factor.
Yeah, so it outputs HDMI, it outputs VGA as well. It runs off an SD card. It also has an accelerator in it if you want to run things faster as well. So you literally plug in a Raspberry Pi Zero into it as an accelerator board. Yeah, so it's actually a really capable machine, and it looks really pretty. So I missed out. It was a Kickstarter project, and I missed out on the Kickstarter, and I kicked myself for doing that because it was an awesome machine. But miraculously, I found one boxed, unused in Cape Town, and I picked it up. And I've now got a ZX Spectrum Next as well. It's brand new. They never used it because I think the people that bought it couldn't get it to work. So basically, I picked it up from them, and now I've got the ZX Spectrum Next. But it also has a nice community behind it. So the original game developers for the ZX Spectrum are now creating games for the ZX Spectrum Next. So there's games being released this year and things for it. And one of the people in the ZX Spectrum Next Facebook group actually has game tutorials and things like that. He was also original games creator for the ZX Spectrum. So I've also been following all that type of thing because yes, I write software for a living, but I'm getting back into writing little games and stuff like I used to do for the ZX Spectrum originally via the Next, because it has a whole community behind it, and it's really active. They're also releasing the ZX Spectrum Next 2. It should be coming out in August. So there's going to be at least 10,000 in the community that have those machines, because I think each Kickstarter has about 5,000 machines.
Right. Yeah, I remember reading about the time. I think, oh, that looks interesting, and then kind of never got back to it. Yeah, I did back the recreated ZX Spectrum, the USB Bluetooth keyboard, which I use. I don't know if you've seen that, but I think I've got one of those here somewhere. There we go. So it looks like a Spectrum, but it's a Bluetooth and USB keyboard, and it works really well with retro with emulators. So it's quite good with any of the emulators because they've all got they understand this keyboard and it's got the proper keys on it. So it's a nice little device. So that was a Kickstarter that I backed a few years ago.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, because what's also cool about that Next is there's now clones appearing. So people are making boards and selling them because they've basically opened the design and things like that. So you don't have to wait for the Kickstarter. There's a clone version that you can get to. I think it's a place in Europe that's making them. I can't think of the country offhand, but they're literally clones of the Next. Like the original ZX Spectrum had clones from Russia, and I think there was a Spanish clone and things like that. The Next has clones now coming out as well.
Now, you mentioned about restoring machines. So what machines have you restored?
Yeah, so that Acorn Electron was restored. I've probably restored about 9 ZX Spectrums, personally. So that's machines that's got dead RAM, it's got dead ULAs, that's got also found that it's not just the membranes that give out on ZX Spectrums, it's the membrane connectors as well, which have always been floppy on the boards. So it's fixing things like that. Also did lots of conversions and things for ZX Spectrums. So from RF output to AV and things like that. So modded a lot of ZX Spectrums as well. The QL was a restoration project. I've restored a couple of ZX Spectrum Plus 2s as well. One of the ZX Spectrum Plus 2s was one that seems to be, it must have been like left on a window frame near the sea, and it like rusted totally. Even the edge connector was rusted off. So restored that, and even restored the tracks on the board and things like that, and got that one up and running. What else has been restored? The Amiga 500 I didn't have to restore, which was cool. The CPC, yes, the CPC 464, the tape drive didn't work and things, so I restored it by just replacing the tape mechanism and wiring it up. And that's recreated ZX Spectrum. I built my own version of that. I used the Arduino to do the membrane to USB conversion. So I've used the Arduino Nano to do the mapping between the keyboard matrix, and it outputs then as a USB keyboard as well. And then I took it a little bit further and I put a Pi 0 in the case, and I now run that bare metal emulator on it. So that was a rebuilt Spectrum from scratch, but using a Raspberry Pi and an Arduino to make it work.
Yeah, that's one. We were talking about that a few weeks ago, whether different ways of doing it, but perhaps building a Raspberry Pi into a microdrive and sort of creating a Bluetooth keyboard with that and sort of pilot all into a microdrive. So that's quite a good way of working that. So you've got the original membrane and then used an Arduino to read it.
Yeah. So what I did was just followed the normal the service manual for the Spectrum. Just took out the circuitry that they've got for mapping the membrane, and then just read in the inputs from Arduino, just using a normal Arduino Nano. And that has I took the output of that and then fed it into the ZX Spectrum bare metal emulator, and you can get that to now work as a recreated Spectrum. You can also output it as well. The Arduino Nano can also then act as a USB keyboard as well. So basically, then you can map a membrane to a USB keyboard, and then you can plug it into a PC as well.
Yeah, and then run an emulator on there.
Yeah. But yeah, I've got it running the ZX Spectrum bare metal emulator, which is awesome because you just like switch on the Raspberry Pi, and it's like booted immediately into the Spectrum. So it's like
that's what we need to, because that's what we were talking about. Is because I've got the Bluetooth, like this recreated one, which is brilliant. But I was running it with a Raspberry Pi, but then the Raspberry Pi had the OS running, so it was always in a window and never quite that immersive experience.
Yeah, so use the ZX Spectrum bare metal emulator. So there's images for a Raspberry Pi 0, Pi 3, but I recommend using the Raspberry Pi 3A. The form factor is awesome, and it fits nicely in the case. And what that emulator's got is also audio output via the audio connector. So I couldn't get audio to work via Raspberry Pi 0 because it hasn't got an audio out on the Pi 0, but the 3A does. and it's smaller than a Raspberry Pi 3, and it fits nicely in the case. So if you want to shove it in a ZX Spectrum case, it fits really nicely.
That's good idea, because I've got a broken Spectrum, but I think with this, even with if I can just plug straight into a Raspberry Pi using the USB cable, that would be perfect. So that would get that full screen experience.
Yeah. Oh, but I digressed. I was speaking about restore projects.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I also let me just look around the room because there's so many of them. Oh yes, the one per desks. All the one per desks were faulty. So every one of those was a restore project. They also have severe problems with reefer caps, and they exploded and caught fire and things like that. So all those were repaired as well, all three of them. So, but that was quite fun putting that together, because there's no documentation whatsoever. At least all the Sinclair machines themselves, like the QL and the ZX Spectrum, have service manuals that you can still use. The one per desk is just like poking around, and I eventually found a very obscure one per desk Facebook group that has about 20 people in it, which are really experts on it, and they help point out some of the issues and things like that. But it is amazing that there's still communities of people that's like dedicated to these machines.
Yeah, especially something as obscure as that.
As one per desk, yeah, there's literally 20 people in that group, but they're dedicated to one per desk only. but they know it's like backwards. Like if you explain anything that's happening, you can get an answer from them as to what to replace and things.
Yeah, that's good. And the other thing you mentioned is you were actually going to start. Were you thinking of building one of these machines from scratch?
Yes. Yeah. So that Raspberry Pi was just like a lame emulator attempt, but my plan is to build a full ZX Spectrum from scratch. I don't know if I can. Hi. So this is the PC board for it.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so this is you can order these. I didn't make the board myself. It's a issue 4V board. So what they've done is they basically recreated the original board with some modifications, and some aspects to it that it can support, like more modern RAM if you want to. So these little jumpers for settings and things that you could set up. But this is the original, basically as close as you're going to get to the original Spectrum. So this is my plan. I've got 3 issue 2 machines. I'm going to harvest as many components as I can from those machines, because I don't want to throw them away. I don't want to. That's one of the things I don't want to do, is ever take one of these retro machines and throw it away in vain. They always need to be restored. So I'm going to try and reuse as many of the components as I can. But I also have some newly purchased components in case those fail as well. And what's quite interesting is, like, even down to things like the power coils. You can buy new power coils and things like that for it as well, for the power supply. The little TV modulators you can buy quite easily and things like that as well. So I've got all the components for it. I just need to build it now. But to build up carriage for it, I built this. I don't know if you've ever seen this Gigatron TTL machine.
No, I've not seen that there.
Yeah, so this I got at the computer fair in Seattle when I went to the MVP summit, at the Living Computer Museum, and I met the guy that created it, and it just looks so cool because it's in like what the Gigatron is basically this whole box in this nice little wooden case is a CPU. So what they did was they built a CPU out of just discrete TTL components.
Right.
So it's just the 74 series chips put together, and basically the whole box forms a processor. So my plan was, that thing looked really cool, so I bought it. So my plan was to practice building a machine by starting with that, to build up courage to get to the ZX Spectrum and build that, because it might look like a simple machine, but the components and stuff is a lot of soldering work and things like that. So I wanted to pluck up some courage and stuff and build the Gigatron first. And in the meantime, I've also got the board now for a ZX80 to build. And I've also got a Jupiter Ace board as well to build as well. So I might build those for the ZX Spectrum because they are simpler to build.
Yeah, the Jupiter Ace was the Fortran box, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was also supposed to be a competitor to the ZX Spectrum, but I think they only made a couple of thousand of those and then they closed down. But yeah, they're really expensive if you have to buy them now. So I've got a recreated board, which is my plan to create.
So you need to add to your collection then. Have you got Auric?
Auric.
Auric, yeah. So the Auric was like a white version of the Spectrum. It looks like a white 48K Spectrum. But it came out around the same time, about the same price and everything. Similar market, but probably not very common in South Africa.
No, never saw one of those. But what's interesting is like you get all the components. It's like this is the, I don't know if it's popping up,
ZX80 membrane, yeah.
ZX80 keyboard overlays and things like that. You
right.
can just buy them brand new, things like that. So if you're recreating these things, all the components you can get. So like these are the brand new cases. So you get the face plates, you get the keyboard rubbers, and you get, of course, the membranes and all the brand new cases and things like that. Yeah.
And I suppose, especially when you look at the ZX80 and the ZX81, they were designed to be sold as kits. So building them was something that people at home could do. As the computers got better and better over time, there's less accessibility to be able to do anything like that. You can't touch a modern machine with a soldering iron or anything like that. So this is the right stuff to be able to do that on.
Yes, yeah, you're 100% right there, because like even the ZX Spectrum board is starting to become like a little bit challenging to recreate it. But if you go to an IBM PC and stuff like that, you have no chance to recreate those motherboards, those multi-layer boards and things like that. You have no chance. And these old machines are really awesome to work with because there was no concept of security whatsoever. So like these edge connectors, you can connect straight basically to the CPU and you can control stuff from the outside world and things like that. You can't do that anymore with a modern PC. There's no direct channels into the machines because why? It's open for hacking. But what's nice is in a retro machine, you want to hack them.
Yeah, you can do that.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a difficult challenge, but it's achievable, which is what's great with that. And then, what's the reason for rebuild? So for ZX, are they scarce enough now, the original ZX80s, that it's worth rebuilding one, or is it just for the challenge to do it?
Yeah, well, this is for the challenge, but a ZX80, if you had to buy it now, it costs a fortune. So you would probably pay. If you just go look at eBay prices, you can easily pay like £500 upwards for a ZX80. So if you're looking for one, it's really hard to find. I've got one just purely because my father's created one originally from a kit. If you had to buy it, really expensive. If you recreate it, it's quite cheap. The board and the components doesn't cost very much, and it's fun to build. That's the main reason why I'm building it.
Yeah, and then you just got to find space to put them all once you've got them.
Yeah, I've got boxes of machines all over the show, and yes, I've got unfortunately lots in a cupboard that I need to still find shelf space to actually display them. Because what happens is you collect the machines that you find. So I collected like the whole range of Sinclair machines, and then of course you go, oh, I've seen now one that's boxed. So of course now you go collect the boxed versions of all those machines again, and then while you're doing that, you find other machines are attracted to you as well. So I've got cupboards and cupboards full of machines that I need shelf space to actually show them all. But unfortunately, there's still a lot of them in the cupboard.
Yeah, and then once you've got these old machines, is there what's the best ways of maintaining them and keeping them alive?
Yeah, so these machines don't really die. So the worst that happens to them is some of the caps run dry, and you can replace the caps and things. Just some of the machines that you need to just watch out for is like the BBC Micro, and anything that has the old reefer caps in it. So there's like these funny little brown things in wrappers. Those things explode. So you replace those immediately when you get the machine, and then they run for ages. If they lasted 40 years, they're gonna last even longer. What you should do is, if any of the old retro machines you get have batteries in it, take the batteries out, because that's the biggest problem you find with machines is the batteries leak, and then they take out the boards, and then some of them are really, really hard to restore once the batteries have leaked onto the boards. So like the Amiga 500 and stuff has a battery for time and stuff. I just take them out, so you don't need that. You can set it every time you use it and things. So just in case the batteries leak, although you can get new batteries for it, but those NICAD batteries and stuff aren't really good. They will eventually leak. But these old machines will just carry on running. As I say, they've lasted 40 years. They'll last longer. And and if you replace things like the membranes, like these modern, the modern membrane is a much better material than the original ones. These things will probably last for many, many years.
Yeah.
So if you replace it with the modern components, it's going to last.
And I found that I think with some of the old synthesizers I've got, if you just keep using them as well, they seem to work better if you keep using them and don't leave them to get gathered dust in a loft or somewhere like that. Just keep them going, and they seem to last longer that way.
Yeah, also seems to be, especially with the older machines with optical drives. I found some of them that's like, I even got some of the like old PlayStations and things like that as well, PlayStation 1s and all those type of things. If you use them often, those optical drives work like for years. But if you let them stand, as you were saying, if you let them stand for a year or two and you don't use it, you'll find that drive doesn't work anymore. It's just like a weird thing that you find. Yeah.
And I think that's one reason why I've pulled my QL out the loft, because I'm gonna get this going again.
Well, what I did do is, like, I've got some Spectrums that are in pristine condition that I've stored, and I haven't modded them at all. So they're the original, like with RF TV outputs and things like that. And those ones are stored, and then I play with other ones just to keep it like in its original state and things. So I have done that, but yes, you should actually use these things. Because
I mean, I think that it's that balance of using them and modding them so you can use them and keeping the originality, I suppose. I'm sometimes torn as well. It's like, do you mod them to work with a modern TV or not, type thing. So that's why I've kept some of them in the original pristine state, and then some I have converted to AV and things as video outputs as well. So it does seem wrong, like hacking them into just because you want to work on a modern TV. But if you want to use it, you have to do it. Yeah, but I've also got the recreated Commodore 64 as well. I found it at a good price, the Maxi. So they released a little mini one, but the Maxi actually has a working keyboard. So I got that recreated one.
that's nice to play with because it feels like a Commodore 64, but you're not like using like the old machine. I've actually got it here next to me on the desk.
Richard, your TI-99 still working?
Yeah, the collection itself is still up and going. Got a whole range of TI-99 consoles. I am actually about to donate them, though, I think, to the user group and some museums. I don't know if there's the same thing in South Africa, where there are a bunch of museums in the UK which have retro machines like the Sinclairs and the Commodores on display, and they encourage people to come in and have a play. I don't know if that's a thing.
That's one thing that we don't have in South Africa is there's no museums that's dedicated to retro machines. What we're planning to do is start one. So like the original people that started that vintage computer group in South Africa, the one guy has literally got like a couple of garages full of machines, and there's just like rows and rows of these machines on shelves and things like that. Just with what he's got, you could start a museum.
They need to be turned on then.
Yeah, so the plan is to do something like that, but it's just it takes a lot of effort and a lot of capital to start something like that. But there's enough machines in that retro computer group to do a museum. But unfortunately, there isn't any sort of like in South Africa any sort of museum that's dedicated to those.
That's a shame. I mean, as I said, obviously during lockdown, many things have been closed in the UK. But certainly I can think of at least 2, maybe 3 in the UK where they're having a colossal range of machines, even from like mini computers from the 1950s through to PCs, Commodore PETs, all the way up to Spectrums again. And it's really good seeing, particularly I'd say kids and things who come in and they start to use these machines for the first time and they have a wonderful time with it. What do you make of things like say the Raspberry Pi 400 and the emulation approach to thing, where you've got the same concept of the computer is the keyboard, which of course is what we all loved back in the day, but now it's being repurposed for all kinds of exciting things.
Yeah, that Raspberry Pi 400 is awesome because it is like a throwback to those all in the keyboard computers.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm a big fan. So
that you can plug things into.
I've got a whole range of SD cards. There's my Sinclair one, my Acorn one, my Commodore one, and
yeah, no, I love that Pi 400.
But the problem is, of course, then it means that I don't turn on my actual real hardware as much as I should. And as you say, you got to use it or it stops working.
Yeah, but I do even with the emulated machines. I still I don't know if it's true with you as well. I still load them in their standard speed, like because I can't play a game if it was loaded instantly off an SD card. I've tried it and I tried to prove like that I could do it. I can't. If I sit there and watch like in the ZX Spectrum and all some of the other machines as well, got the stripes and the tones and stuff that's playing, and you see the pictures draw and you wait for like 5-6 minutes, that game is so much better afterwards and you actually play it.
Oh, you see, I'm kind of being a TI-99 person. We now had the excitement of screens appearing like pixel or the pixel line by pixel line as it loaded. We just had to sit and watch a blank screen and keep our fingers crossed that there wouldn't be a tape loading error. So I don't mind doing it at all, but I do remember watching particularly Sinclair games load and watching the screen build up and the blue and yellow stripes on the side as loading happened, and then suddenly, oh dear, R-tape loading error.
Yes, but even if you load it in the emulator, so the emulators have got an option to load at standard speed, and you can see the stripes and stuff. Those will never give it an error, which is cool. I just find that the game is so much more enjoyable and you play it longer if you just sit through that. I don't know if it's the stripes that put you into a Zen mood or something like that. And
I think it's because you wait for so long, you think, right, I'm going to play this game now.
Yeah, exactly. It's that.
You invested time in it.
We're not going to sound like a bunch of old men saying, kids today, they're instant gratification with their games. Us, we had to wait for our games to load, and then we enjoyed them properly.
Football, that was it. If you'd spent like nearly 10 minutes getting match day to load, you're going to play it for more than 10 minutes. Whereas if you've got an instant game, you can quickly lose your attention drifts and you go on to something else. So I think that's probably a big part of it. You've invested the time into get that game working.
You made an investment, yeah.
Wow.
You've gone and had a cup of tea, you come back and your game's ready. Or it's on our tape loading error, as you said, Richard.
Yes, saw that many times. I mean, I'm not saying that happened when there'd been perhaps some tape-to-tape copying. I wouldn't know about that.
And that's why they had the high-speed loaders.
Yes.
What's amazing, though, is the tapes that are like 40 years old as well still work. So
it's magnetic media. I fired up one of my TI-99 expansion boxes, which are colossal great metal things, and I had a single-sided, single-density 5¼ drive in it with a floppy that I'd left in there about 35 years ago. Still worked. It still worked. It made a terrible noise, but it did work.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that this will work though. This is match point micro drive. The chances of that working are probably pretty remote.
Yeah, I mean micro drives are a very special thing, aren't they?
Yeah, that probably didn't work when it was new.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, but those micro drives, if they can work, what you must just do is the felt behind it has got like a little piece of material. You can replace that, so that the micro drive presses against the like that's like felt type material.
So I was going to ask you about the rebuilds that you're doing, particularly the ZX80. Are you also going to sort of try and recreate the plastic case, get some cases vacuum molded, or?
Oh yeah, the case is a problem because yes, that case is vacuum molded. 3D printing, it's not going to give you the same effect as that case.
No, exactly.
I haven't thought it that far. So the plan is just to build the board, and I've got the keyboard overlay and things to put on the board. But yeah, I'll think about the case.
We could always go for full homebrew. I mean, I can remember one of my friend's fathers built one for him, and he actually ended up building a wooden box for it to go in. So
make it like an Apple One.
Exactly, very like that. Yes. So you can always go for that and say I've gone for the full retro effect, and with splinters.
Yeah, I have the same problem with the Jupiter Ace that I'm building as well, because that case also is going to be a problem to reproduce. The ZX Spectrum is easy because I have piles and piles of these brand new boxes for them. So that's not a problem. Rubbers and boxes, and as I say, I've got some old +2s that are not +2s, issue 2 ZX Spectrums that are dead. They've also got the cases and things intact, so I haven't got a problem with recreating the ZX Spectrum. But I'll worry about that when I get there. I'll first build the case, but the wooden box that this Gigatron is in is awesome.
Look at that.
Yeah, I don't know if it's popping up with my.
Yeah, just about. Yeah.
Yeah, because this is like in a little glass case. Let's do this.
Yeah, that looks good.
Yeah. So maybe make a little box like this with a display case.
Yeah.
It's like that for the.
So you can show your handiwork.
Exactly. That's the way.
Show that soldering.
Yeah, maybe I'll do that.
So what we thought we would do is, we're going to get you back on the show when you start this project, because I thought you could then come back on and tell us how you're getting on with it. We'll probably do a few actually. We'll probably do one when you're part way through it, and then we'll probably get you back when you get closer to the finish, because I think it's going to take you some time. That
we can always do. We can always perhaps do it where we do our live podcast from the Computing Museum in the UK this summer.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. That's right. We're going to get to one of the computer museums in Cambridge, I think, in the summer when we've all been vaccinated. So we'll get down there and we can see if we can see any rarities for you.
Yeah. It's On the topic of museums, have you been to the Living Computer Museum in the US? It's was sponsored by Paul Allen from Microsoft.
Not heard of it though.
Heard of it? Yeah.
Yeah, because sadly that's closed down due to COVID. So they shut down their doors, but now they're closed permanently.
Oh, permanently? Oh, that is good.
Yeah, that's quite sad, because that was a nice place for people to go, and all the machines were up and running, so you could play with them as well. Yeah. They still had some quite cool machines.
Certainly here in the UK, I know that the two museums I'm familiar with, the museum, the Centre for Computing History and the National Museum of Computing, they are both going to reopen, but I know they've both struggled during the course of the pandemic because it's just been no income. They've lost all their revenues, all their income, because they depend on people coming and also doing events. But yes, it's sad to hear that the Paul Allen place is closed, because I think it's good to allow people to get hands-on time with the computers, as opposed to just seeing them behind a glass case. You actually want to have your fingers on the keyboard and see things happen on the screen.
Yeah, no, they had everything that was up and running. So they even had little Apple II classrooms with desks with Apple IIs, but every machine you could play with, even the mainframes and things like that, you could use them all.
Yes, but over here it's all Acorn BBC Model Bs that they use, which are the stuff we used at school, and also Commodore PETs.
Yeah.
Yeah. What I didn't like about the Living Computer Museum, they had no Spectrums.
Timex.
Not Sinclair in that building. Yeah, that's all the US machines. So the closest they had was a Timex 1000, which is a ZX81.
Yeah.
And then the rest were all just like Commodores and Ataris and.
Yeah, I think Commodore, Atari, and Apple kind of own the home computer market, didn't they? In the US, the Sinclairs or Timexes never really took off in the US. And I know it seemed to almost break Acorn when they tried to launch their computers in the US. But obviously Europe, it's a very different scene.
Yes. Yeah.
So So Alan, where's the best place then people can find you, to follow you, because you've got so much interesting stuff on there. Just fascinating watching, you going through your retro stuff as well as your work stuff and your developer stuff.
Well, all the random stuff you'll probably find on Twitter. So Twitter handle is ADPeed. So it's ADPEAD. So if you go on Twitter, you'll find everything. If you go search for ADPeed, ZX Spectrum, or actually just go ZX Spectrum Azure, you also find a ZX Spectrum connected to the cloud, doing IoT telemetry as well. So the best place to find weird and obscure things and things that probably only retro fans would enjoy, the Twitter handle is probably the best.
Excellent. Well, it's been really good to get you on the show. I am definitely going to pick your brains about getting my QL connected up to a modern monitor. So I'll come back to you on that one. We'll get that. I'm going to try and get that working. Now I have got some stuff to do. We'll get you back on the show when you've started work on your project as well, and we'll get an update from you, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'll first probably build the ZX80. As I say, I'm building up courage to do the Spectrum.
Start and work your way up.
So we can do a couple of sessions.
Excellent. Well, I've really enjoyed chatting. It was brilliant. We'll get you back on the show soon. Really enjoyed that.
No, thank you very much for having me. And yes, always love speaking about these things. So thanks for the opportunity to speak about it.
Oh, brilliant. Okay, thanks, Alan. So, Richard, where can we find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Richard_Speed.
Excellent stuff. Well, we'll be back next week, and we'll catch up on all the Apple and insider news and everything else next week. So until then, we'll see you next week.